So for this worksheet, we're going to talk about the real numbers and we're going to break them down into different groups and categories. So topic one is all about the integers. Okay, so we have a few definitions. First of all, a set is a collection of objects. This can go far outside the math world. So you could have a set of cards, you could have a set of dishes, a set of sheets, or in math, you can have sets of numbers. Okay. The objects in a set are called the elements of the set. So when we're in math looking at sets of numbers, the different numbers in that set, we just call them the elements. Okay. Now, in order to get to the integers, you have to know two other sets of numbers. First, we have the natural numbers. The natural numbers are also called the counting numbers. So also known as the counting numbers. And the reason we call them the counting numbers is because the natural numbers are the numbers we use to count. So if you had a stack of dollar bills, you would start with one, and then you would go to two, and then three, and then four. So that is the set of natural numbers. It does not contain zero. It does not contain negative numbers. It does not contain decimals or fractions. So the natural numbers are quite literally the way we would count. So the counting numbers. Um, Next up, we have the whole numbers. So the whole numbers are basically the counting numbers, but instead of starting at one, we do include zero and we start at zero. Okay. And that finally leads us to the integers. So the integers are the whole numbers and then all of their negative counterparts. So no decimals, no fractions, but we do have negatives now. Okay. The set of integers, again, it does not contain decimals or fractions. So these nice, pretty whole numbers, but then also their opposites or their negative counterparts. So let's look at the first couple of examples here. So example one is just short answer. So part A says list a real world example of a positive number. There are gazillions of things that we could do for real world examples of positive integers. So we could talk about bank accounts. You could have a positive integer as a bank account. We could talk about temperature. Anything above zero would be a positive integer. You can talk about climbing a certain height. You could talk about counting things. So like how many cars do you own? How many homes do you own? How many home rooms are in your home? How many classes are you taking? Anything like that could be a real world example of a positive integer. So we could talk bank accounts, assuming it doesn't have any change, it's just the dollar amount. We could talk temperatures. We could talk elevation. So you go on a hike and you reach an elevation of 300 feet above whatever. So elevation, we could talk about counting things. So like how many rooms are in your home? How many homes do you own? How many cars do you own? How many dishes do you own? How many pots do you own? Anything like that could be a positive integer. Okay. Now the next part B says list a real world example of a negative integer. Again, unfortunately, bank accounts. You could end up overdrawn in your bank account. So as long as you're not talking about the change, the cents part of your bank account, you're just talking about the dollar part. You could talk about bank accounts. Again, temperature. We can have temperatures that fall below zero. We could talk about diving. All right. So a lot of these examples, like word problems, you'll see they'll talk about scuba diving or diving below the surface of a lake or the ocean. You could also talk about climbing. So hiking, instead of climbing up or hiking up a mountain, you could be at the top and coming down. You could think of that as a negative elevation or a negative integer. We could talk about digging. So you go and dig a hole in your backyard, you went down 2 feet. All right. So those would be real world examples of positive and negative integers. Now, one thing that you will start seeing is plotting numbers on a number line. So a number line is just a horizontal line that is broken down with little tick marks that represent different numbers, integers or decimals, fractions, whatever. In this case, we're talking integers. So for example 2, it says plot the integers on a number line. And for part A, we want to plot -10, -2, 0, 5, and 7. So all you do is you locate that number on the number line, and then you put some way to mark it, a star, an X, a dot, whatever the case may be. So first up, we have -10. So the way you need to understand integers is you start kind of at zero. Anything to the left of zero would be a negative integer. Anything to the right of zero would be a positive integer. So once we find zero, we just go to the left until we find -10. And luckily, this number line is already labeled, so we don't even have to worry about labeling where -10 is. we don't even have to worry about labeling this spot as -10. We just need to mark -10 on the number line. Next up, we have -2. So again, it's going to be to the left of 0. And I can see -2 is already labeled. I just want to mark it. So that's me plotting that point. They want us in this example to plot 0. So we put a mark on 0 on the number line, and then 5 and 7. It doesn't have to be dots. Again, you could use stars, you could use X's, just some way to indicate that's the point you're looking at. All right, so for part B, we want to plot all of the even integers. Even means divisible by 2. That means if you were to divide a number by 2 and you get some nice pretty whole number, that's an even integer. Even integers end in 0. Well, let me do that in numbers. I don't know why I started spelling them out. They end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So if a number ends in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, you know it's even. So 10 ends in 0. Then we have 8, 6, 4, 2. 0 is kind of its own little thing. It's not really even. It's not really odd. And then we get 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So there we have plotted numbers on the number line. All right. So make sure you understand just what integers are. Make sure you understand real world examples of positive and negative integers, and make sure you know how to plot on a number line.